A strange ripple moved through the galaxy long before anyone understood its meaning. A disturbance not born from the Force, yet powerful enough to make even seasoned Jedi pause in confusion. For ages, both Jedi and Sith believed every source of strength traced back to that ancient current flowing through all life. But then something arrived that shattered that certainty. 8 figures emerged from the void, each carrying abilities that answered to no cosmic field, no sacred tradition, no Force-guided destiny. Their power couldn't be sensed, suppressed, or severed. It simply was, raw, immutable, and terrifyingly unique. And with their arrival came a single, impossible question. What happens when mutation stands face to face with midi-chlorians? What happens when the X gene challenges the very foundation of the Force itself? The twin suns of Tatooine beat down mercilessly on the dune sea, their heat shimmering across endless sand. In the distance, a Jawa sandcrawler trudged along its daily route, its treads leaving deep grooves in the desert. The scavengers had detected unusual energy readings near the Jundland wastes, not the electromagnetic signatures of crashed starships, but something that made their sensors scream with interference before going dark entirely. They never found the source. By the time their sandcrawler arrived, the 8 impact craters had already cooled, and the scattered figures were gone. Logan dragged himself up from the sand, adamantium claws instinctively extending as his healing factor worked overtime to repair 3 broken ribs and a shattered collarbone. The pain was familiar. He'd survived worse. But the twin suns overhead were wrong. Dead wrong. His last memory was clear. The Sentinel attack on the mansion, Cerebro overloading as Charles tried to push the psychic dampeners back. Jean's eyes blazing with phoenix fire as she screamed for everyone to hold on, and then nothing. Just the sensation of being torn apart and reassembled across an impossible distance. "Kurt!" Logan's gravelly voice cut through the desert wind. "Psych, anybody?" Silence. Just the whisper of sand and the distant cry of some creature he didn't recognize. Logan's enhanced senses cataloged his surroundings. Wrong air composition, unfamiliar mineral scents, and something else. An energy that pressed against his awareness like static electricity before a storm. It made his teeth ache. He retracted his claws and started walking. Somewhere in this wasteland, the others had to have landed. Xavier would find them. Charles always found them. 300 kilometers away, in the industrial sprawl of Mos Eisley's sister city Mos Shuta, Kurt Wagner materialized in a cloud of sulfurous smoke inside a warehouse filled with Rhodian smugglers. Their weapons came up instantly, targeting the blue-skinned figure with the tail and the terrified yellow eyes. "Bitte! Please, I mean no harm!" Kurt's hands shot up, his German accent thick with panic. His teleportation had felt wrong, like pushing through syrup instead of slicing through space. The 2 jumps he'd made trying to escape the desert had left him exhausted in a way that never happened before. The Rhodians didn't lower their blasters. They'd never seen anything like him, not quite alien enough to be familiar, too strange to be human. One of them clicked something in their native language that Kurt's polyglot abilities couldn't parse. Not a language he knew, not a language from Earth. Where in God's name were they? Aboard the Imperial Star Destroyer Inexorable, orbiting the shipyard world of Corellia, Dr. Silo examined his 2 newest specimens with scientific fascination. The female, designated Subject Sigma, possessed unusual physical characteristics, white striped hair, unexplained epidermal absorption properties that had hospitalized 3 stormtroopers who touched her bare skin. She remained unconscious, sedated after her violent awakening. The male, Subject Beta, was perhaps even more intriguing. Blue fur covered his entire body. His hands and feet were disproportionately large, and his muscle density defied standard human parameters. More importantly, the initial cognitive tests suggested intelligence far beyond baseline human norms. Currently restrained in an energy field, the creature watched Silo with remarkably expressive eyes. "Where are we?" Hank McCoy's refined voice surprised the Imperial scientists. "I must insist you release us immediately. We are American citizens, and you have no legal authority." "Silence," Silo commanded, adjusting his datapad. "You will answer questions, Subject Beta, beginning with, what are you?" Hank's brilliant mind raced through the evidence. The technology was beyond anything on Earth. Energy fields, ships visible through the viewport that dwarfed any human spacecraft, aliens moving through the corridors. The conclusion was impossible, but inescapable. They weren't on Earth anymore. They weren't even in their own universe. "Oh, my stars and garters," Hank whispered. In the rebel base hidden within Ord Mantell's volcanic wastelands, General John Dodonna studied the holographic recording for the third time. His intelligence operatives had captured footage from a Mos Shuta security camera. A blue humanoid appearing from nowhere in a burst of smoke, disappearing seconds later, then reappearing on a rooftop 2 kilometers away. Not a force jump, not a jetpack, something else entirely. "Could be a new type of stealth technology," his aide suggested. "The Empire's been developing?" "No." Dodonna shook his head. "Look at his face. That's not the expression of an Imperial operative. That's someone who's terrified and lost." He paused. "Find him. Bring him in. If the Empire's hunting someone who can move like that, I want to know why." In the deepest chamber of the Imperial Palace on Coruscant, Emperor Palpatine stopped mid-sentence during his conversation with several Imperial advisors. His ancient eyes narrowed, his connection to the dark side suddenly rippling with disturbance. Not danger, not yet, but wrongness. Like looking at a familiar constellation and finding stars that shouldn't exist. "Leave me," he commanded. The advisors scattered. Palpatine reached out through the Force, searching for the source of the disturbance. He found echoes, impressions, 8 distinct signatures scattered across the outer rim. Each one radiating power that felt adjacent to the Force, but fundamentally separate from it. Power that did not flow from midi-chlorians. Power that existed independent of the cosmic balance. For the first time in decades, Darth Sidious felt something unfamiliar. Uncertainty. Whatever these beings were, they represented a variable he had not foreseen. Variables led to complications. Complications threatened the grand design. They would need to be studied, controlled, or eliminated. On Tatooine, Logan crested a dune and finally spotted civilization. A cluster of moisture farms, and what looked like a small town in the distance. The suns were setting now, painting the desert in shades of orange and red that reminded him of Jean's hair. Jean, Charles, Scott, Aurora, Rogue, Hank, Kurt. He'd find them all. He'd done it before, tracked his team across continents, through wars, across timelines. This was just one more impossible situation. The X-Men had survived worse. Logan didn't know that, in a fortress on the moon of Nur, Darth Vader had just received orders from his master. "Find these beings. Bring them to me. Use whatever means necessary." He didn't know that Charles Xavier was, at this very moment, waking in the hold of a Corellian smuggling ship, his telepathy screaming with the voices of trillions of minds across thousands of worlds. He didn't know that Aurora Monroe had awakened in the slave markets of Zygerria, her weather powers already attracting dangerous attention. All Logan knew was that his family was scattered across an alien galaxy, and he was going to find them, one way or another. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The Dusty Bantha, a battered YT-1300 light freighter that had seen better decades, limped through the Corellian trade spine with a hold full of contraband spice and one very unexpected passenger. Captain Vex Naralin, a Myriolan smuggler with green skin marked by geometric tattoos, had found many strange things in his 15 years running blockades. Wookiee freedom fighters, Jedi artifacts, even a baby rancor once. But nothing like the bald human in the wheelchair. "You're telling me," Vex said slowly, pacing his cramped cockpit, "that you can hear thoughts, everyone's thoughts, from here to the core worlds." Charles Xavier sat perfectly still in the repulsor chair Vex had jury-rigged from cargo lifting equipment, his hands pressed to his temples. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the ship's cool, recycled air. Not hearing, precisely. Sensing. The mental landscape of your galaxy is overwhelming. Trillions of conscious minds, all creating a psychic pressure I've never experienced. It's like trying to hear a whisper during a hurricane. Right. Vex's hand drifted toward his blaster. "And I should believe you, because..." Charles looked up, and his eyes, despite the pain evident in his face, held absolute clarity. "Because you're thinking about your brother. Kyle. He died on Scarif during the Death Star data heist. You volunteered for the mission, but your ship had engine trouble, and you've blamed yourself every day since. You think if you'd been there, maybe you could have..." Vex's blaster was out and aimed at Charles's head in a heartbeat. "How in the frozen hells of Hoth do you know that? Nobody knows that. Kyle's death wasn't even in the official records. I told you, I can sense thoughts." Charles raised his hand slowly, peacefully. "I'm not your enemy, Captain Naralin. I'm simply a man, very far from home, trying to find his family. And right now, you're the only person who can help me." The blaster didn't waver. "Why would I help you? You're some kind of witch. Maybe Empire, maybe something worse." "Because," Charles said gently, "you're a good man who's tired of running from the guilt. Helping me find my people, helping reunite a family, might be the first step toward forgiving yourself for something that was never your fault." Vex stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly, he holstered his blaster. "You really can read minds, stars and suns. The rebels would pay a fortune for someone like you. I'm not interested in payment. I need passage to Corellia." Charles's voice hardened with determination. "2 of my X-Men are being held in an Imperial facility there. I can sense them, feel their distress. We're getting them out." "We?" Vex laughed bitterly. "Listen, mind reader, I'm a smuggler, not a hero. I don't raid Imperial installations. That's a death sentence." Charles tilted his head slightly, and his telepathy brushed against Vex's mind with the lightest touch, not intrusive, not controlling, just showing. Images flickered. A blue-furred scientist trapped in an energy cage. A young woman with white-streaked hair thrashing against sedation, stormtroopers delivering electric shocks to test their prisoners' durability. "Still not a hero?" Charles asked quietly. Vex cursed in 3 languages. "You're going to get me killed. Perhaps. But you'll die doing something that matters." In the Cantina district of Ord Mantell City, Wolverine nursed his 3rd glass of something that tasted like motor oil mixed with battery acid, while Nightcrawler fidgeted nervously beside him. The rebel operatives who'd rescued Kurt had brought them both here, to a safe house above a noisy bar filled with aliens, smugglers, and what Logan was pretty sure were several wanted criminals. We should trust them, yeah? Kurt's tail twitched anxiously, a tell Logan had learned to read decades ago. They saved me from the Empire. They fight fascists like we do. Kid, we don't know a damn thing about these people. Logan drained his glass and signaled for another. For all we know, the Empire are the good guys, and these rebels are terrorists. Logan. Kurt's yellow eyes widened with shock. You cannot mean that. I have seen the Empire's forces. They attacked civilian populations. Yeah, and I've seen freedom fighters do the same. Hell, we've done worse when we thought we were right. Logan's voice dropped lower. Point is, we got dropped into somebody else's war, not our fight. The door to their room slid open, admitting a human woman with sharp features and commander's pips on her rebel uniform. Captain Shona Vess had the look of someone who'd seen too much combat and not enough sleep. Behind her, 2 rebel soldiers stood ready. Gentlemen, she said, settling into a chair across from them. Let's talk about what you can do for the Alliance. Logan snorted. How about you tell us how we get home first? Home? Vess's expression suggested she thought they were insane. You appeared out of nowhere on Mos Shuta using technology we can't even begin to understand. Our scientists would need years to... Then we got nothing to talk about. Logan stood. Come on, Kurt. We're finding the others ourselves. Wait. Vess's voice sharpened with command authority. You're looking for others like you? More people with unusual abilities? Logan paused. Kurt's tail stopped twitching. The Empire captured 2 beings on Corellia 3 days ago. Vess continued. Our intelligence network intercepted coded transmissions. Imperial scientists are very excited about specimens that defy force analysis. Does that sound like your friends? Logan's claws extended an inch before he forced them back. Where on Corellia? A research station in orbit. Maximum security. We've been trying to get intelligence assets inside for months. Vess leaned forward. But someone who can teleport through walls and someone who can apparently survive anything? You 2 could get in where we can't. And in exchange? Kurt asked softly. Help us hurt the Empire. Help us free people from tyranny. Vess's jaw set firmly. Then we'll devote every resource we have to getting you home. Logan studied her face, his enhanced senses cataloging micro-expressions, heart rate, pheromone shifts. She believed what she was saying. That didn't mean the rebels could deliver, but she wasn't lying. We ain't soldiers, Logan growled. We go in, we get our people, we get out. Anything else that happens is collateral damage. You clear on that? Crystal. Good. Logan extended his hand, adamantium claws sliding out to full extension. Vess flinched, but didn't retreat as the metal gleamed under the cantina's lights. Because if you're lying, if this is a trap, these go through your skull. We clear on that too? Vess met his feral gaze without blinking. Crystal. Kurt made the sign of the cross and muttered a prayer in German. This was happening. They were about to raid an alien space station to rescue Hank and Rogue. Just another Tuesday for the X-Men. On Zygerria, in the ornate slave auction houses where beings were bought and sold like livestock, Aurora Monroe stood in chains on a raised platform. Her white hair flowed like a mane. Her dark skin bore the marks of slavers' prods. But her eyes, they held the fury of gathering storms. The Zygerrian auctioneer, a feline humanoid in elaborate robes, gestured grandly toward her. Behold, a female of unknown species. Observe her exotic features, her defiant spirit just waiting to be broken. The crowd of slavers, criminals, and Imperial procurement officers murmured with interest. Aurora's jaw clenched. She'd woken in these chains, her powers suppressed by some kind of dampening collar. Her last memory the same as Logan's, the mansion, the sentinels, Jean's scream. But the collar was weakening. She could feel it. Whatever technology powered it wasn't designed for mutant abilities. The X-gene didn't run on the same energy as this galaxy's force. Every hour, she felt her connection to the weather strengthening. Soon, she would show these slavers what it meant to chain the storm. An Imperial officer in a gray uniform raised his datapad. 100,000 credits. 150, countered a Hutt's translator droid. Aurora closed her eyes and reached for the sky. Somewhere above this auction house, clouds were gathering. Not many, not yet, but soon. In the outer rim, Scott Summers opened his eyes for the first time since the displacement. Immediately, his optic blasts lanced out, carving through the ceiling of whatever structure he was in. He slammed his eyes shut, cursing. His visor, his ruby quartz visor that controlled his mutation, was gone. He was blind without it, and deadly. "Help!" he shouted into the darkness behind his eyelids. "Someone help me! I can't control it!" Footsteps. Multiple beings approaching. Scott kept his eyes squeezed shut, his hands outstretched. "Please, I need something to cover my eyes. Red-tinted glass, ruby quartz, anything that can filter." Something clicked around his head. A helmet or visor of some kind. Scott cautiously opened his eyes and found himself looking through a red-tinted display. Not his visor, but close enough. The HUD showed readouts in a language he couldn't read. Better? The voice belonged to a protocol droid, its photoreceptors glowing softly in the dim room. "I am C-3PO, human-cyborg relations. You were found unconscious in the Yunland wastes by my counterpart R2-D2. Are you perhaps related to the Jedi Order?" The what? Scott looked around. He was in some kind of moisture farm. Primitive, utilitarian. Nothing like Earth architecture. "Where am I?" "Tatooine, sir. Specifically the Lars homestead. Though I must say you've arrived at a rather inconvenient time. Young Master Luke left some months ago to join the rebellion, and we've been maintaining the farm ever since. Master Owen and Aunt Beru would have known what to do with a Jedi, but they..." C-3PO's voice faltered. "They perished." Scott's tactical mind raced. Rebellion, Empire, Jedi. None of it made sense, but the pattern was familiar. Authoritarian government, resistance movement, people with special powers. And somewhere in this insanity, the rest of the X-Men were scattered. "C-3PO," Scott said carefully, "I need you to tell me everything about this galaxy. Starting with, what's the fastest way off this planet?" The Imperial Research Station Empirical hung in geostationary orbit above Corellia like a steel talon, its angular hull bristling with sensor arrays and turbo-laser batteries. Inside its sterile white corridors, Dr. Silo reviewed his latest findings with growing excitement. In 15 years of xenobiological research for the Empire, he'd never encountered specimens quite like these. Subject Beta, the blue-furred male, possessed cognitive abilities that tested off the standard Imperial intelligence scale. In 3 days, he'd learned basic, deduced the fundamental principles of repulsor lift technology, and composed a mathematical proof that improved hyperdrive efficiency by 0.7%. More troubling, he'd begun asking questions about ethics, sentient rights, and the legal framework of the Galactic Empire that made the Stormtrooper guards uncomfortable. Subject Sigma, the white-haired female, was a different kind of problem. Every physical contact resulted in unconsciousness for the person touching her, as if her skin drained life force itself. 3 technicians were still in the med bay. The sedatives were losing effectiveness, and her vital signs suggested she'd wake within the hour. "Sir," a junior researcher interrupted. "Lord Vader is requesting an update." Silo's blood chilled. Vader? Of course, the Emperor's enforcer would take personal interest. Tell him we're preparing a comprehensive report." "He's already en route, sir. ETA 15 minutes. Silo cursed quietly and returned to the holding cells. Time to get answers before the Dark Lord arrived and potentially killed everyone involved. Hank McCoy hung suspended in the energy field, his brilliant mind working through permutations. The technology around him was fascinating. Artificial gravity without visible mechanisms, energy barriers that selectively allowed air passage but nothing solid, computational systems that operated on principles he was only beginning to grasp. Under different circumstances, he'd have been thrilled to study it all. But Rogue was 3 cells away, sedated and vulnerable, and they were prisoners of what appeared to be an authoritarian galactic empire. Not ideal circumstances for scientific inquiry. The door hissed open. Dr. Silo entered, flanked by Stormtroopers whose armor design was remarkably efficient from a protective standpoint, if somewhat fascistic in aesthetic. The Kaminoan scientist activated a datapad and studied Hank with cold curiosity. "Subject Beta, I have questions. Answer truthfully, and your conditions will improve." "My name," Hank said with careful dignity, "is Dr. Henry McCoy. I hold doctorates in biochemistry, genetics, and physics from Harvard University. I am not a subject, and I demand to speak with proper legal authorities about our unlawful detention." Silo's expression didn't change. "You claim to be a doctor of multiple disciplines, yet you appear to be some form of evolutionary aberration. Explain." "I am a mutant, Homo superior, a natural genetic variation of baseline humanity." Hank chose his words carefully, trying to gauge what these people understood about genetics. "My X gene, a dormant genetic trait activated during adolescence, grants enhanced physical and cognitive abilities. Approximately 1 in every million humans on my world carries this gene." "Your world?" Silo leaned closer. "You're claiming to be from another planet? There are no records of your species in Imperial databases." "Not another planet, another universe entirely." Hank met his eyes steadily. "I don't expect you to believe me without evidence, but I suspect your own analysis has revealed genetic markers that don't match any known human variant in your records." Silo's silence was confirmation enough. "The young woman you're holding," Hank continued, "her name is Rogue, Anna Marie. She's frightened, alone, and her mutation makes her dangerous if mishandled. She absorbs the life force of anyone she touches, their memories, abilities, even their life energy. If your people keep trying to physically interact with her, they will continue to fall unconscious, or worse. How do we contain her safely? You don't. You release us both immediately and help us find our companions." Hank's voice hardened. "We are not weapons to be studied. We are people who want only to go home. Home to another universe." Silo's tone dripped skepticism. "Even if such a thing were possible, the Empire has no interest in facilitating." The alarms screamed to life. Red emergency lighting bathed the corridor. A stormtrooper's voice crackled over the comms. "Intruder alert. Multiple hostiles in Docking Bay 3. They're teleporting. And one of them has blades coming out of his hands." Hank's hearts, both of them, leaped with hope. Logan. It had to be Logan. 20 minutes earlier, Kurt Wagner had teleported himself and Wolverine through the Imperial's shields in a series of jumps that left him gasping and exhausted. The effort of teleporting through whatever energy fields protected the station had taken everything he had. But they were inside. "You okay, Elf?" Logan's claws were already out, his healing factor working overtime against the vertigo of Kurt's teleportation. "Yeah, just need moment." Kurt leaned against the bulkhead, sulfur smoke dissipating around them. They'd materialized in a storage bay, surrounded by crates marked with Imperial insignia. Through the viewports, Corellia's green-blue sphere dominated the view. Logan's enhanced hearing picked up boot steps, 8, maybe 10 soldiers approaching. "Company, stay behind me." The door slid open and stormtroopers poured through, blasters raised. "Hands up! On the ground now!" Logan grinned, feral and dangerous. "Sorry, boys. Fresh out of surrender." He launched forward with berserker fury, adamantium claws slicing through blaster rifles like paper. The stormtroopers' armor might stop conventional blades, but Logan's claws were the hardest metal on Earth, and apparently just as effective here. He moved through them like a force of nature, taking blaster bolts to the chest that his healing factor sealed within seconds. Kurt teleported behind the remaining soldiers, bamf, disarming them with quick strikes. His time with the X-Men had taught him that teleportation made him nearly impossible to fight if he used it tactically. Appear, strike, disappear. The stormtroopers couldn't track him. 30 seconds. That's all it took to leave 8 Imperial soldiers unconscious on the deck. "Hank!" Logan roared, his voice echoing through corridors. "Rogue, where are you?" Alarms shrieked in response. More soldiers would come. They needed to move fast. Kurt grabbed Logan's shoulder and teleported them deeper into the station, following the layout they'd memorized from the Rebel intelligence briefing. Holding cells would be in the secure section, middle decks. His teleportation range was limited, maybe 20 meters per jump in this strange galaxy where his powers felt sluggish. But it was enough. They materialized in a corridor lined with energy field cells, and there, suspended in glowing fields, were Hank and Rogue. "My God," Kurt whispered. "We found them." Hank's eyes widened with relief. "Logan, Kurt, thank heavens. But you must leave immediately. Vader is..." The temperature dropped 20 degrees. The lights flickered. And at the end of the corridor, a door opened with a hiss of hydraulics. Darth Vader stepped through, his breathing apparatus loud in the sudden silence. The Dark Lord of the Sith stood nearly 7 feet tall, his black armor reflecting the emergency lighting, his presence radiating an almost physical pressure that made Kurt's instincts scream danger. "Intruders," Vader's mechanical voice rumbled. "You will surrender or be destroyed." Logan's claws extended to full length. "Funny, I was about to say the same thing." Vader raised one gloved hand, and Logan flew backward as if struck by an invisible giant fist. He slammed into the bulkhead hard enough to dent the metal, then slid to the floor. The Force. Vader was using the Force. "Logan!" Kurt teleported to his side, bamf, but Vader was already moving. Impossibly fast for someone in full armor, the Dark Lord closed the distance, and his crimson lightsaber ignited with a snap hiss that Kurt would remember for the rest of his life. The blade came down toward Kurt's head. Kurt teleported, bamf, reappearing behind Vader. The Sith Lord spun with preternatural awareness, lightsabers slicing through the space Kurt had occupied a microsecond before. Kurt's tail lashed out, wrapping around Vader's wrist, trying to disarm him. Big mistake. Vader's grip tightened, and Kurt felt bones grinding together. The Dark Lord lifted him by the tail, slamming him into the ceiling, then the floor. Kurt's vision swam with pain and stars. He'd never felt strength like this, not even from Juggernaut. "Your tricks," Vader said coldly, "are meaningless." Logan was back up, healing factor having already repaired 3 cracked ribs. He charged Vader with a roar, claws aimed for the Dark Lord's chest. Vader released Kurt and met Logan's attack, the lightsaber clashing against adamantium with a shower of sparks and an ear-splitting screech of energy meeting indestructible metal. For a moment, Vader seemed genuinely surprised. His lightsaber, which could cut through blast doors, wasn't slicing through Logan's claws. The two locked in close combat, Logan's berserker fury against Vader's methodical precision. "What are you?" Vader demanded, genuinely curious. "I'm the best there is at what I do." Logan snarled, pressing forward. "And what I do ain't pretty." Vader used the Force to throw Logan again, harder this time. Logan crashed through a cell door, his body leaving an impact crater in the reinforced wall. But he stood up again. He always stood up. In her cell, Rogue had awakened. Her eyes focused on the battle, on the monster in black armor attacking her friends. Her dampening collar sparked, its power systems failing after days of struggling against her mutant physiology. With a surge of desperate strength, she ripped it free. Her powers flooded back like a dam breaking. Every person she'd ever touched, every ability she'd ever absorbed, suddenly accessible. Ms. Marvel's strength, Wolverine's healing factor absorbed from dozens of accidental contacts, memories of fighting Sentinels, Magneto, the Brotherhood. "Hey!" Rogue's voice rang out, thick with her Mississippi accent. "Pick on someone who can actually hit back." She tore through the energy field with borrowed super strength and flew straight at Vader. The Dark Lord turned, lightsaber raised, but Rogue had Ms. Marvel's invulnerability. The blade glanced off her skin like it had struck armor plating. Her fist connected with Vader's helmet with the force of a starship cannon. The Dark Lord crashed through 3 walls before stopping. Alarms screamed even louder. Structural integrity warnings flashed. Through the holes in the walls, they could see space. The station's hull had been breached. "Hank!" Logan was at the scientist's cell, claws slicing through the control panel. The energy field flickered and died. "Get Kurt. Rogue, we're leaving now." Hank caught the semi-conscious Kurt, cradling him gently. "Logan, he's in no condition to teleport us out." "Then we find another way." Logan grabbed a blaster from an unconscious stormtrooper. "Move." They ran through corridors filled with emergency lockdown procedures, stormtroopers mobilizing, and somewhere behind them, Darth Vader rising from the rubble. The Dark Lord's anger was palpable, even at a distance. A dark pressure building like a storm about to break. In the docking bay, the rebel operatives had already commandeered an Imperial shuttle. Captain Vess waved frantically from the boarding ramp. "Move, move, move!" The 5 X-Men, battered, exhausted but alive, sprinted up the ramp. The shuttle's engines screamed to life. Through the cockpit view screen, they watched stormtroopers pouring into the bay, blasters firing. And then Vader appeared, standing at the entrance. He raised both hands, and the shuttle, already lifting off, lurched backward as the Force gripped it. The engines strained against impossible strength. Metal groaned under supernatural pressure. "He's pulling us back!" Vess screamed, pouring power to the engines. "We can't break free!" Rogue stumbled to the loading ramp, still open, wind screaming past. She locked eyes with Vader across 100 meters of empty space. She'd absorbed too many heroes' memories to back down now. "Sorry, sugar," she muttered. But nobody cages the X-Men. She jumped. Flying at supersonic speed, she slammed into Vader again. This time, she grabbed him, skin-to-skin contact through the gaps in his armor. Her absorption power activated immediately, pulling life force, memories, skills. But what she touched wasn't entirely human anymore. It was cybernetics, suffering, and something vast and dark that burned her psyche like acid. Pain, Padme, the younglings, I hate you, the Emperor's lightning. Burned, broken, trapped, must serve, cannot die, cannot live. Obi-Wan, I am what remains. Rogue screamed and let go, flying back to the shuttle. Her borrowed invulnerability was fading, Carol Danvers' powers draining as they always did. But it had been enough. Vader had released the shuttle to defend himself. The Imperial shuttle Zeta-7 blasted out of the docking bay at full throttle, dodging turbo-laser fire, diving toward Corellia's atmosphere in a controlled fall that would have terrified any sane pilot. Inside, the 5 X-Men collapsed in a heap. Logan's healing factor sealed the last of his blaster wounds. Kurt's tail hung limp, broken in 3 places. Hank examined him with gentle expertise, while Rogue sat in the corner, shaking, tears streaming down her face. "Rogue?" Hank's voice was soft with concern. "What did you see?" "Him," she whispered. "I saw what he is, what he was. God help us all, he's a monster. But he wasn't always. He was a man once, a good man. And they broke him into that thing." Logan placed a hand on her shoulder, glove between skin and skin, always careful. "We got out. That's what matters." "Did we?" Hank gestured to the view screen, where the Imperial was launching TIE fighters in pursuit. "We've made an enemy of the Empire's most feared enforcer. We've revealed our abilities to a galactic government that will want to weaponize or eliminate us. And we're no closer to finding Charles, Jean, Storm, or Cyclops. One thing at a time. McCoy." Logan's voice was pure gravel and determination. "First, we lose these bastards. Then we find the others. Then we figure out how the hell we get home." The shuttle screamed through Corellia's atmosphere, TIE fighters on its tail, and the 5 X-Men held on for the ride. Behind them, in the Imperial's command center, Darth Vader stood before a holographic projection of Emperor Palpatine. The Dark Lord's breathing was labored. Rogue's attack had damaged his respiratory systems. Medical droids would need hours to make repairs. "These beings," Palpatine's voice hissed with barely contained rage, "are not force-sensitive, yet they possess power that rivals your own." "Explain this, Lord Vader?" "I cannot, my master." Vader's mechanical voice held an emotion rarely heard from him: uncertainty. "Their abilities defy explanation. The female touched me through the Force itself. She saw..." What did she see? A pause. Everything. Palpatine's hologram flickered with dark fury. "Then they can't be allowed to survive. They are a threat to the natural order. Find them, hunt them, exterminate them before they can spread word of what they've learned." "Yes, my master." The hologram vanished. Vader stood alone in the darkened command center, one gloved hand unconsciously touching his chest where Rogue had struck him. The pain was already fading, but the memory remained. For the first time in years, Darth Vader had felt fear, not of death, not of pain, but of what that young woman had seen in the broken remnants of Anakin Skywalker's soul. The dusty bantha dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zygerria system, with all the grace of a wounded bantha falling down a reactor shaft. Warning lights painted the cockpit red as Vex Narlin fought the controls, cursing in Mirialan, while Charles Xavier gripped the armrests of his jury-rigged repulsor chair. "I thought you said this ship was reliable," Charles shouted over the screaming alarms. "I said it was mine." Vex snapped back, killing the hyperspace motivator before it tore itself apart. "Reliable is for people with Imperial credits. We work with what we've got." Charles's telepathy had been reaching out for hours during their journey, searching through the psychic noise of 1,000,000,000 minds for the familiar mental signatures of his X-Men. He'd found 5 of them on Corellia. Their rescue by Logan and Kurt had been a relief that nearly made him weep. But 2 remained missing, and one of those signatures pulsed with barely controlled fury somewhere on the planet below. Aurora, Storm, and she was in trouble. "The slave markets are in the capital city," Vex said, bringing up a tactical display. "Zygerria's entire economy runs on sentient trafficking. The Empire tolerates it because it's profitable and keeps non-humans subjugated. If your friend ended up in the auction houses, then we extract her immediately." Charles's voice held steel that Vex was learning to recognize. The professor might preach peace and coexistence, but he did not negotiate when his people were threatened. "Great plan. Except Zygerrian slavers have private armies, force fields, and a cultural tradition of making examples out of attempted rescues." Vex pulled up security footage of the auction houses, massive compounds bristling with guards and anti-air batteries. "We'd need a strike team, proper weapons, and about 6 kinds of luck we don't have." Charles closed his eyes, his telepathy reaching down through the planet's atmosphere, filtering through millions of minds until he found her. Aurora Monroe, standing on an auction platform in chains, her mental presence blazing with the promise of imminent violence. Around her, the minds of slavers, cruel, calculating, viewing sentient beings as property. Beyond them, thousands of slaves suffering in pens and cells. "We're not leaving her," Charles said quietly. "And we're not leaving any of them." Vex stared at him. "You want to free an entire slave market? I want to burn it to the ground." On Zygerria's surface, Aurora felt the dampening collar's power finally fail completely. The suppression field that had kept her mutation locked down for days dissolved like morning mist, and suddenly she could feel it all. Every air current in the auction house, every pressure system in the atmosphere above, every electrical charge building in the storm clouds she'd been unconsciously summoning since her arrival. The Zygerrian auctioneer was still prattling about her exotic features and breeding potential. When Aurora opened her eyes, they glowed pure white, crackling with electrical discharge. "The auction," she said, her voice carrying the rumble of distant thunder, "is over." Lightning struck through the auction house's reinforced dome, punching through energy shields designed to stop starship weapons. The bolt hit the stage dead center, vaporizing the auction platform and sending slavers flying. Aurora rose into the air, her white hair whipping in winds that obeyed only her command, her body surrounded by a corona of electrical energy. "I am Aurora Monroe," she declared, her voice amplified by the storm itself. "I am Storm, and I am the punishment for your sins." The Zygerrian guards opened fire with blaster rifles, but Aurora's winds deflected the bolts harmlessly. She raised her hands, and the storm answered. Rain lashing down in sheets, hurricane winds tearing through the compound, lightning striking guard towers with surgical precision. Not killing, she maintained that much control, but incapacitating. The slaves in their pens stared upward in awe and terror. A goddess had descended, wreathed in storm and fury. In the VIP section, an Imperial procurement officer activated his comlink with shaking hands. "This is Agent Trevick. We have a Force user, possibly trained, requesting immediate..." Lightning struck his comlink, fusing it into slag. Aurora descended until she hovered at eye level with the Imperial. "I am not Force-trained. I am mutant-born, and you will regret what your Empire has done." She released a focused gust of wind that sent him tumbling across the compound. Then Aurora turned her attention to the slave pens, her winds tearing open electronic locks, her lightning destroying control collars. Thousands of slaves, Twi'leks, Wookiees, humans, dozens of species, stumbled free, disbelieving. "Run!" Aurora commanded, her voice carrying over the storm. "Find ships, find freedom. No one owns you." But Zygerrian slavers didn't build their fortunes by being easily intimidated. The compound's defensive weapons came online, heavy repeating blasters designed to suppress slave revolts. They tracked Aurora, firing streams of plasma that would reduce her to ash. Charles felt the danger spike through their telepathic connection. "Vex, we need to be in that compound now." "Working on it." The smuggler brought the dusty bantha screaming through Zygerria's atmosphere at angles that violated every safety regulation. He lined up on the slave compound just as the defensive turrets opened fire on Aurora. Vex triggered the ship's laser cannons, illegally modified to military grade, and blew 3 turrets into scrap metal. The bantha roared over the compound at 50 meters, its boarding ramp already lowering. "Storm!" Charles's telepathic voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "The ship! Now!" Aurora's white eyes found the freighter, and more importantly, the familiar mental touch of Charles Xavier. "Professor?" Her mental voice carried shock and overwhelming relief. "We're extracting you. Come aboard immediately." Aurora didn't hesitate. She rode a waterspout of her own creation up to the bantha's ramp, touching down just as Zygerrian fighters launched from nearby hangar bays. Vex pulled up hard, G-forces slamming them into their seats as he burned for orbit. "Charles!" Aurora stumbled into the cockpit, rain still dripping from her hair, lightning still dancing across her fingertips. She saw him in his repulsor chair, and her face crumpled with emotion. "Thank the goddess. I thought I was alone. I thought..." "You're not alone," Charles said gently, wheeling closer. 5 others are safe on Corellia. Logan, Hank, Kurt, Rogue, and we believe Scott. Jean is still missing. But we're together now, Storm. We'll find the others. Aurora knelt beside his chair, her usual regal composure broken by exhaustion and relief. "Where are we, Professor? How did we..." "Another universe entirely. I know it sounds impossible, but the evidence is irrefutable." Charles gestured to the viewport where Zygerria fell away below them, and unfamiliar constellations glittered beyond. "We've been displaced to a galaxy governed by something called the Force, embroiled in a war between a tyrannical empire and rebel alliance, and we've already made quite an impression." "Great," Vex muttered, watching his sensors light up with pursuing fighters. "The Zygerrians are scrambling their defense fleet. Also, there's an Imperial Star Destroyer in system that's taking interest in our little jailbreak. So maybe save the reunion for after we survive the next 10 minutes. Charles reached out with his telepathy, touching the minds of the Zygerrian pilots. Just a gentle suggestion, a nudge toward confusion. Targeting computers malfunctioned. Flight paths wobbled. 2 fighters nearly collided as their pilots suddenly couldn't remember which ship they were chasing. "Professor?" Aurora's eyes widened. "Did you just..." One of many adaptations I've made, Charles explained. Telepathy functions differently here, but I'm learning to work with the limitations. Though affecting multiple minds simultaneously still requires significant concentration. The Star Destroyer Ravager loomed ahead, already launching TIE fighter squadrons. Its massive wedge-shaped hull blocked out the stars, a monument to Imperial might and oppression. Vex's hands flew across the controls, plotting a hyperspace jump. 30 seconds to light speed, if we survive that long. TIE fighters swarmed like angry insects, their twin ion engines screaming. Green laser bolts filled space around the Bantha. Vex rolled and dove, but they were outnumbered 50-1. A hit to the starboard shield generator sent sparks flying through the cockpit. "Charles," Aurora said quietly, standing up. "Can you open the boarding ramp? In space? You'll be killed." "No." Storm's eyes began to glow white again. "I won't." Charles stared at her, then understood. Mutant powers weren't bound by this galaxy's rules. Storm could survive in vacuum. She'd done it before, creating a protective envelope of atmosphere around herself. And in the vacuum of space, with no air resistance, her electrical powers would be devastating. "Do it," Charles commanded Vex. The smuggler thought they were insane, but he triggered the ramp. Atmosphere vented explosively. Charles's repulsor chair maglocked to the deck. Vex's safety harness held firm. And Aurora Monroe walked into hard vacuum as if it were a summer breeze. She spread her arms wide, feeling the solar wind, the electromagnetic fields of the planet below, the radiation from Zygerria's sun. In space, she was more powerful than she'd ever been on Earth. No atmosphere to limit her, no ground to anchor her. Here she was pure elemental force. Lightning erupted from her hands, not the grounded lightning of planets, but pure electrical discharge following magnetic field lines. It leapt from tie to tie, overloading systems, shorting out ion engines. A dozen fighters went dark in seconds, spinning helplessly as their pilots ejected. The remaining ties scattered, their tactical programming unable to account for a combatant who functioned in hard vacuum. Aurora pushed herself forward with directed air currents, a sphere of breathable atmosphere she maintained around her body, and released electromagnetic pulses that scrambled sensors across the entire squadron. "Impossible," Vex whispered, watching his sensors. "She's taking out an entire wing by herself." "She's an Omega-level mutant," Charles said with quiet pride. "One of the most powerful beings on our world. And here, without Earth's limitations, she's showing only a fraction of her potential. The Ravager's captain made the wise decision to let them go. Whatever that woman was, she wasn't worth the losses." The Star Destroyer's turbo lasers stayed silent as the dusty Bantha completed its hyperspace calculations. Aurora returned to the ship, frost forming on her skin as she crossed back into atmosphere. Charles closed the ramp and she stumbled, gasping, her power expenditure finally catching up with her. "Magnificent," Charles said. "Absolutely magnificent. And completely insane," Vex added, engaging the hyperdrive. The stars stretched into lines, and Zygerria vanished behind them. "You people are going to get me killed, or make me a legend. Possibly both." In the cargo hold, Aurora wrapped herself in thermal blankets, shaking from cold and adrenaline. Charles wheeled over, his hand finding hers. "How many did we free?" Aurora asked softly. "Thousands. Your storm destroyed the security systems across 3 auction compounds. The slaves are scattering across the planet." Charles smiled. "Some will be recaptured, inevitably, but many will find freedom because of you. It's not enough. That whole planet runs on slavery, Charles. An entire civilization built on suffering. I know, and we'll address it when we can. Charles squeezed her hand gently. But first, we need to reunite our team. Vex has arranged a meeting point with the rebel contacts who helped Logan and the others. Once we're all together, we can decide our next move. Which is? That depends, Charles said thoughtfully, on whether we're trying to get home or whether we're going to change this galaxy. Ororo met his eyes. Can't we do both? Charles smiled. That's why you're on the team. On Coruscant, in the Emperor's throne room deep within the Imperial Palace, Palpatine watched holographic projections of the Zygerria incident with cold fury. The security footage showed everything. A woman commanding weather itself, surviving in vacuum, defeating an entire fighter wing without technology or the Force. Another one, he hissed. 8 beings now, scattered across my empire, each one wielding power that does not bow to the Force. Grand Moff Tarkin stood beside the throne, his gaunt face impassive. Lord Vader's report confirms the others possess similar abilities. Regeneration, teleportation, strength, and the blue one displays genius-level intellect that could rival our best scientists. They are a virus, Palpatine spat. A contamination introduced to the galaxy's natural order. The Force governs all, light and dark, life and death. These beings exist outside that balance. They threaten everything. Shall I mobilize the fleet to hunt them? No. Palpatine's ancient eyes gleamed with dark cunning. That would make them martyrs, rally sympathy. The rebellion would use them as symbols. We must be more subtle. He turned to face Tarkin fully. Deploy the Inquisitors. Send bounty hunters. Make them fugitives, criminals. Discredit them before the galaxy. And once they're properly isolated, you'll convert them? Some, perhaps. The others? Palpatine's smile was a death's head grin. They'll serve as examples of what happens when one defies the natural order. Across the galaxy, the X-Men had no idea a Sith Lord's full attention now focused on their destruction. They were too busy trying to survive the next crisis, find Jean Grey, and somehow navigate a war they'd never asked to join. But they would learn soon enough. In the Star Wars galaxy, there was no neutral ground, no safe harbors, no escape from the eternal conflict between tyranny and freedom. And the X-Men, whether they wanted it or not, had just become the most wanted beings in Imperial space. The rebel base on Dantooine was barely worthy of the name. A collection of prefabricated structures hidden in ancient ruins, protected by sensor jammers and hope. In the largest building, converted from a Jedi temple thousands of years abandoned, 7 X-Men sat around a holographic tactical display, while rebel officers tried not to stare at the blue-furred scientist or the woman whose hair defied gravity. General John Dodonna, veteran of the Clone Wars and architect of the Death Star attack, studied each of them with a commander's analytical eye. Logan, still healing from blaster burns despite his remarkable recovery speed. Kurt, his tail in a splint, but his yellow eyes alert. Hank, taking notes on a datapad he'd already reverse-engineered. Rogue, keeping carefully gloved hands in her lap. Ororo, regal even in borrowed rebel fatigues. Charles, his telepathy a constant presence at the edge of everyone's awareness. Scott, wearing repurposed Stormtrooper helmet optics that gave him a vaguely menacing appearance. Only Jean Grey remained missing. Let me make sure I understand, Dodonna said carefully. You're from another universe. You possess abilities unrelated to the Force. You've already assaulted an Imperial research station, freed yourself from Darth Vader, and liberated 3,000 slaves from Zygerria. and you expect the Rebel Alliance to just accept you? We expect nothing, Charles replied evenly. We're asking for temporary alliance of convenience. You have resources, ships, intelligence networks, safe houses. We need to find our missing teammate and determine if returning home is possible. In exchange, we can offer capabilities your rebellion has never possessed. And if we refuse? Logan's claws extended an inch. Then we do it ourselves. But you seem like decent people fighting a war worth fighting. We'd rather work together. Captain Vess, standing beside Dodonna, cleared her throat. Sir, I've seen what they can do. The teleporter alone could infiltrate any Imperial facility. The weather controller defeated an entire fighter wing, and the one with the claws killed Vader's elite guard without taking permanent damage. She makes a compelling case, Hank interjected, adjusting his glasses. Though I should note that our presence here is already causing significant disruption to local space-time topology. The longer we remain, the more unstable certain quantum phenomena become. Everyone stared at him. He means, Scott translated, that we might be screwing up reality just by being here. Precisely, though I'd phrase it more delicately. Hank pulled up readings on the datapad. I've been analyzing sensor data from our arrivals. Each one created gravitational anomalies consistent with dimensional membrane rupture. If the breach that brought us here isn't properly sealed, it could expand, potentially catastrophically. Dodonna's expression hardened. How catastrophically? Worst case? Total collapse of local space-time, consuming this entire sector. Hank saw their faces and added quickly, but that's extremely unlikely. Probably. I'm working with very limited data and technology I barely understand. Comforting. Vex muttered from the corner where he was nursing a bottle of Corellian whiskey. Charles leaned forward in his repulsor chair. General Dodonna, we understand your hesitation. You're fighting a war with limited resources against overwhelming odds. The last thing you need is additional complications. But consider, the Empire wants us dead or captured. That makes us natural allies. And if there's even a chance we can help you strike meaningful blows against Imperial tyranny, isn't that worth the risk? Dodonna studied the holographic star charts, his tactical mind running calculations. What exactly can each of you do? Specifically. Charles nodded to his team. This was the moment. Trust or continued isolation. Scott went first, removing his helmet to reveal the ruby quartz visor beneath. I project concussive force beams from my eyes, powerful enough to demolish buildings or punch through starship hulls. I can't control it. The beams are always active. Only this quartz stops them. He demonstrated by aiming at a reinforced wall and unleashing a brief pulse. The optic blast carved a 2-foot crater in Dura steel. Several rebels jumped. Aurora stood next, her eyes glowing white. Winds began swirling through the sealed room despite no open windows. I command weather. Wind, lightning, rain, temperature. In space, I manipulate electromagnetic fields and solar radiation. On a planet, I can summon hurricanes or droughts. The winds died as her eyes returned to normal. I am called Storm. Kurt teleported, bamf, from his seat to the ceiling, clinging there with prehensile toes. I teleport short distances, perhaps 20 meters in this galaxy. It's harder here than home. I leave behind sulfur smell and this sound. He vanished with another bamf, reappearing in his chair. I also have enhanced agility and can blend with shadows. Rogue kept her distance, but pulled off one glove. I absorb life force, memories, and powers through skin contact. It's not controllable. Anyone I touch without protection falls unconscious if I hold contact long enough. She didn't finish, but her haunted expression said enough. Hank cleared his throat. Enhanced strength, agility, and intellectual capacity. 6 doctorates, expertise in genetics, physics, biochemistry. I can likely reverse engineer much of your technology given time and resources. Logan simply extended his claws fully. 12 inches of gleaming adamantium. Healing factor. Can't be killed, far as anyone's proven. Enhanced senses. I can track by smell, hear heartbeats 50 meters away. Best combat fighter you'll ever meet. He retracted the claws. Also the hardest metal in my universe. Your lightsabers can't cut it. Charles was last. I'm a telepath. I can read thoughts, influence minds, project illusions, and coordinate team communications across vast distances. In your galaxy, I'm learning to interface with the Force itself, though I'm not Force-sensitive in the traditional sense. He paused. I can also incapacitate entire groups without permanent harm, a useful talent for minimizing casualties. The room was silent as Dodonna absorbed this. Finally, he spoke. You're telling me you're a strike team that can infiltrate anywhere, survive anything, destroy Imperial installations, and coordinate perfectly without communication equipment. Yes, Charles said simply. And you want nothing in return except help finding your missing friend and possibly returning home? Correct. Dodonna looked at Captain Vess, then at Mon Mothma's holographic avatar that had been observing silently. The rebel leader's elegant features remained composed, but her eyes held calculation. The Senate would never approve, Mon Mothma said. Too risky, too unknown. The Senate isn't here, Dodonna replied. I am, and I'm looking at a tactical asset that could change this war. He turned back to Charles. Your missing teammate, Jean Grey. Tell me about her. Charles's expression tightened with concern. Powerful telekinetic and telepath, potentially the most powerful of us all. But she's also complicated. John struggles with a force we call the Phoenix, a cosmic entity bonded to her psyche that amplifies her abilities to godlike levels. If she's manifested here without proper control, she could destroy planets? Dodonna asked flatly. She could destroy solar systems. Charles met his eyes. Which is why we must find her immediately. If the Empire locates her first, if they attempt to weaponize or contain her, the Phoenix Force will respond. Violently. Stars and suns. Best breathed. There's one more powerful than the weather goddess. John is... Scott's voice was rough with emotion. She's everything. And if she's scared, alone, fighting for control, the Phoenix won't let anyone hurt her. It'll burn entire fleets from the sky. Logan nodded grimly. Jeannie's the best of us. But the Phoenix? That's a whole different problem. Dodonna made his decision. Captain Vess, assign them quarters, full base access. Beast, Dr. McCoy, you'll work with our tech specialists. Storm, we need to understand your capabilities for potential orbital assault missions. Wolverine, Nightcrawler, I want you training our special forces in infiltration techniques. He looked at Charles. Professor Xavier, you and I need to discuss intelligence gathering. If you can read Imperial minds from orbit, we need to know what's possible. And Jean? Charles pressed. We'll use every resource to find her. I'm authorizing deep space reconnaissance in sectors where similar energy anomalies have been reported. Dodonna stood. But understand this. If your teammate becomes a threat to civilian populations, We will respond accordingly. I won't sacrifice innocent lives, not even for allies." "Fair enough," Charles agreed, "though I doubt your weapons would stop the Phoenix." "Then pray," Dodonna said, "that we find her before she loses control." The meeting adjourned. As the X-Men filed out, Hank lingered beside the holographic display, studying star charts with fascination. An entire galaxy of unexplored science. If circumstances were different, this would be paradise for a researcher. "Dr. McCoy?" A voice interrupted. Mon Mothma's hologram had remained active. "A word, if you please." Hank glanced around, but they were alone. "Of course, Senator. You mentioned dimensional instability. How much time do we have before this becomes critical?" Hank hesitated. He'd downplayed the danger in the meeting, not wanting to cause panic. But Mon Mothma deserved the truth. Months, perhaps. But the rifts are growing. Each time one of us uses our powers extensively, it creates minor fractures in local space-time. Nothing immediately dangerous, but cumulative. Eventually. He sighed. Eventually, reality itself could begin breaking down in localized pockets. Small at first, objects phasing out of existence, temporal loops, matter-energy conversions going awry. But escalating. Can you stop it? I'd need to understand your galaxy's fundamental physics, map the dimensional boundaries, locate the original breach point, and devise a method of sealing rifts using technology that doesn't exist in either universe. Hank smiled tiredly. So, yes, theoretically possible. Practically, I give it 5% odds. Those are poor odds, Doctor. I've beaten worse. Hank's blue eyes held determination. And I have no intention of letting this galaxy collapse because we were careless. I'll find a solution. I always do. Mon Mothma studied him with respect. I believe you will. May the Force be with you, Dr. McCoy. Given that I apparently exist outside the Force, I suspect I'll need something else on my side. Hank smiled wryly. But I appreciate the sentiment. Outside, in the Dantooine twilight, Logan stood smoking one of Vex's cigars. Horrible things, but tobacco was tobacco. Scott joined him, helmet removed now that they were in safe territory. You trust these rebels? Scott asked. About as much as I trust anyone. Logan exhaled smoke. They're fighting fascists. That's enough for now. And after, when we find John, when we figure out how to get home, we just leave them to their war? Logan was quiet for a long moment. I've walked away from wars before, Psych. Left people to fight their own battles. Always told myself it wasn't my problem. He flicked ash from the cigar. But I saw what that empire did to Beast and Rogue. Saw them caged like animals. And I've seen enough fascism in my life to know what comes next if good people don't fight back. So we're staying? Fighting this war? We're finding Jean first. Everything else is secondary. Logan's voice hardened. But yeah, if we're stuck here, if we can't get home, I ain't sitting this one out. Not when I can make a difference. Scott nodded slowly. Cyclops of the Rebel Alliance. Never thought I'd be fighting Stormtroopers instead of Sentinels. Different uniform, same tyranny. Logan crushed out the cigar. Come on, Xavier wants a team meeting. Probably gonna give us one of his speeches about hope and unity. Would you rather he didn't? Logan grinned, feral and genuine. Hell no. That's what keeps us from being just another strike team. Charlie reminds us we're something better. Inside the converted temple, the 7 X-Men gathered in their assigned quarters. Cramped, but private. Charles had located a bottle of actual Earth whiskey in Vex's smuggling inventory, acquired from an unknown source decades ago. They passed it around, each taking a sip of home. "To Jean?" Charles raised the bottle. "May we find her swiftly and safely." "To Jean," they echoed. "And to us," Charles continued. "We're far from home, perhaps farther than any human has ever been. But we remain what we've always been, a family, mutant and proud. And whether we're fighting sentinels on Earth or stormtroopers in a galaxy far, far away, we stand together." "Cheesy speech, Professor," Rogue said, but she was smiling. "I have a reputation to maintain." Charles smiled back. "Now rest. Tomorrow, we begin searching for Jean in earnest, and we show this Empire what happens when they threaten the X-Men." In orbit above Dantooine, an Imperial probe droid transmitted final images before its self-destruct sequence activated. The images showed 7 individuals of unknown species exhibiting impossible abilities, aligned with rebel terrorists. The data reached Darth Vader's personal Star Destroyer within the hour. The hunt had begun. The meditation chamber aboard the Executor was a sphere of pure darkness, a void where Darth Vader could retreat from the constant mechanical symphony that kept him alive. Here, the rhythmic hiss of his respirator was the only sound, the glow of his console the only light. He floated, cross-legged, at its center, his consciousness cast adrift on the currents of the dark side of the Force. He sought clarity, a path through the disruption these outsiders had caused. He reached for them, as he had a dozen times before. Their presence in the Force was not an absence, as with a Yisala Miri, but a dissonance, a shrieking, staticky wrongness that grated against his senses. He could feel the echoes of their passage, the psychic scream of the telepath on Zygerria, the ozone and lightning tang of the Weather Witch, the raw, animal fury of the one with the claws. But when he tried to touch their minds, to divine their intentions or locate them with precision, his vision blurred, as if he were trying to read text through frosted glass. It was the girl, Rogue, who had done this. Her touch had been a violation that transcended the physical. The psychic scar she had left was a crack in his armor, not of durasteel, but of will. In that fleeting contact, she had not just seen Anakin Skywalker's ghost. She had reminded Vader that he still existed. And that memory was a poison. His meditation was shattered by a priority alert. The hologram of the Emperor flickered to life in the darkness, the sickly yellow eyes burning with contained malice. "Lord Vader, the disruption continues to spread. These mutants now consort openly with rebel scum on Dantooine. I am aware, my master. The 7th Fleet is poised to descend upon the system." No. The single word was a lash. A full-scale assault would be wasteful. The rebels would scatter, and these creatures with them. Their value and their threat lies in their uniqueness. The Blue One's intellect, the teleporter's infiltration potential, the telepath's intelligence-gathering capacity. They are assets. And the one called Jean Grey, the one they fear most, remains at large. She must be found before they do. What is your command? The Inquisitors have failed to contain them. Conventional forces are too blunt an instrument. It is time to employ hunters of a different caliber. Palpatine's lips twisted into a smile. I have authorized a bounty, the largest in Imperial history. 50 million credits dead. 100 million delivered alive to Imperial custody. The Guild has already begun to stir. Vader understood. He had once been the galaxy's most feared hunter. He knew the caliber of being such a sum would attract. They will be torn apart by the scum of the underworld. or they will prove their worth by surviving, the Emperor countered. Let the galaxy's predators test their mettle. We shall observe. And when they are weary and bloodied, we will collect the survivors. Update me when the first blood is drawn. The hologram vanished, plunging Vader back into darkness and the rhythm of his own breath. The plan was elegant, cruel, and efficient. It was the Sith way. Yet, as he rose from his meditation, the memory of Rogue's touch was a cold spot in his mind. A good man. And they broke him. The words were an infection. He crushed them, channeling the anger into his hatred for these interlopers. They would be broken too, one way or another. The cantina in the Mos Eisley spaceport had seen better centuries. The air was thick with the smell of cheap fuel, cheaper ale, and unwashed patrons. In a shadowy booth far from the band, 4 figures sat. The massive bounty pucks in the center of the table glowing with the faces of the 8 X-Men. Boba Fett, his Mandalorian armor scarred and painted, said nothing. He simply watched the holograms rotate, his helmet giving no hint of his thoughts. Beside him, the droid IG-88 analyzed the data with cold logic. Probability of successful capture of all 8 targets, 3.7%. Recommendation: isolate high-value targets. The telepath and the intellectual present the greatest strategic value. Cad Bane, his wide-brimmed hat shadowing his red eyes, chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. You think like a calculator. The big money's on the ones who put up the biggest fight. The healin' one, the weather girl, they're the trophies. Bringing in the brains is just a bonus. The 4th hunter, a newcomer named Kradosk, a Trandoshan, hissed. The scorekeeper will grant many points for such powerful prey. I care not for credits. I will take the scalps of the strong. Suit yourself, lizard, Bane muttered, his gaze fixed on the image of Wolverine. That one's mine. I like a challenge that fights back. Boba Fett finally spoke, his voice a modulated growl. The rebels are hiding them. They won't stay in one place for long. We find the trail, we work alone. Interfere with my hunt, and you become the target. He stood, scooping up his puck. The message was clear. The hunt was on, and the greatest hunters in the galaxy viewed each other with as much suspicion as they did their prey. On Dantooine, the peace was shattered by a scream that was not a sound, but a psychic shockwave. It tore through the base, dropping rebel soldiers to their knees, clutching their heads. Charles Xavier cried out, his hands flying to his temples as if to hold his skull together. Jean! The thought was a supernova of fear, pain, and raw, untamed power. It was a beacon and a warning, flaring for a single, terrifying second somewhere in the outer rim before vanishing as suddenly as it had appeared. Charles gasped, slumping in his chair. The Tion hegemony, a dead system. Fedra. She's there. And she's in agony. Scott was at his side in an instant. What's happening to her, Professor? The Phoenix, it's awake. And it's fighting her for control. The feedback, it's like nothing I've ever felt. Charles's face was pale. We have to go. Now. If the Empire felt that. In orbit, an Imperial listening post had, indeed, registered the anomaly. The coordinates were triangulated and transmitted. The bounty pucks across the galaxy chimed in unison, updating with a new, temporary location. The race had begun. General Dodonna authorized the use of the Lightbringer, a fast-forward reconnaissance frigate captured from the Empire. There was no time for debate. The X-Men, plus Vex as their pilot, boarded immediately. As the ship leapt to hyperspace, hurtling towards the Tion hegemony, Charles gathered his team in the common area. The usual confident demeanor was gone, replaced by a profound dread. "I must be clear," he said, his voice heavy. "The Jean we find may not be the Jean we lost. The Phoenix Force is a cosmic entity of death and rebirth. Unchecked, it is rage and fire. What she unleashed just now was a cry for help, but it was also a declaration of power. The Empire will be coming. Bounty hunters will be coming. We may have to fight them all." "Let them come," Logan growled, sharpening his claws against each other. "We're getting Jeannie back." "It may not be that simple, Logan," Charles warned. "If she has lost control, if the Phoenix is dominant, we may have to do the unthinkable to save this galaxy from her." The silence that followed was colder than the void outside the ship. Scott stared at the floor, his jaw clenched. The idea of having to fight the woman he loved was a horror beyond any the Empire could conjure. The Lightbringer raced through the swirling blue tunnel of hyperspace, a tiny vessel carrying the hopes and fears of its passengers towards a confrontation that would change everything. They were no longer just refugees or allies. They were the center of the storm, and the galaxy was closing in. The Fedra system was a graveyard. The Lightbringer dropped out of hyperspace at its edge, its sensors sweeping across the cosmic wreckage. A shattered planet, its continents blasted into drifting archipelagos of rock, hung in the void. The debris field was immense, a glittering, silent testament to an extinction-level event from millennia past. "There's no star," Vex muttered, his hands dancing across the console. "The system's primary went supernova. Took everything with it. Scans show minimal background radiation. Whatever happened here, it was a long, long time ago." "Except it's not dead," Hank said, his blue fur bristling as he studied the sensor readouts. "There's an energy signature emanating from the largest planetary fragment. Fluctuations match the psychic burst Charles detected. It's immense." "It's Jean," Scott whispered, his face pressed against the viewport as if he could see her through the rock and vacuum. "Vex, take us in," Charles commanded, his voice tight. "Slow and careful. We don't know what we're walking into." As the frigate navigated the treacherous debris field, a smaller, uglier ship emerged from behind a tumbling moonlet. A Razor Crest-class vessel, its hull pitted and scarred. "Bounty hunter," Vex spat, his hand slamming down on the weapons control. "They're hailing us." The comm crackled. A familiar, modulated voice filled the cockpit. "X-Men, stand down and prepare to be boarded. You are worth more alive, but the bounty does not specify your condition." Boba Fett. Before anyone could respond, a streak of crimson energy lanced from the Razor Crest, striking the Lightbringer's shield generator. The ship shuddered violently, alarms blaring. "He's not here to talk," Vex yelled, banking hard as laser fire streaked past the viewport. "Kurt, get me over there," Logan barked, his claws already out. "Nein, Logan. It is a trap. He will expect that." "Then we give him something he doesn't expect," Aurora said, her eyes beginning to glow. "Charles, can you project an illusion? Make him see a different ship?" "I can try," Charles said, closing his eyes in concentration. But his helmet, his will is formidable. It's like trying to grip polished durasteel. The Lightbringer shook again as another blast impacted the rear deflector. Fett was a master, herding them deeper into the debris field, limiting their maneuverability. Suddenly, a new ship screamed out of hyperspace. A sleek, aggressive Vengeance-class frigate, its hull painted with the jagged red markings of the Inquisitorius. Turbo laser batteries swiveled, locking onto both the Lightbringer and the Razor Crest. "The Empire," Scott said grimly. They were waiting. A hologram of the second sister flickered to life on the bridge. By the authority of the Emperor, you will power down your vessels and surrender the mutants. This is your only warning. The situation had just become a three-way standoff. Fett, seeing his prize threatened by Imperial bureaucracy, turned his fire on the Inquisitor's ship. The space around the dead world became a storm of laser fire and shrapnel. Now, Charles shouted over the din. While they're distracted, Kurt, take Scott and Logan to the surface. Find Jean. We'll hold them off here. With a triple bamf of sulfurous smoke, the three X-Men vanished from the frigate's deck. They materialized on a desolate plain of black, glass-like rock under a sky dominated by the colossal, broken sphere of the dead world. The air was thin and cold, but breathable. The psychic pressure was immediate and suffocating, a weight that pressed down on their very souls. "She's here," Scott said, his voice hushed with awe and terror. "I can feel her." A city of crystalline spires rose in the distance, untouched by the planetary cataclysm, glowing with a soft, internal fire. It was a structure that defied the ruins around it, a thing of beauty and impossible preservation. As they moved toward it, a figure dropped from the sky, landing before them with an impact that cracked the glassy ground. It was the third sister, her lightsaber humming with menace. "The Jedi are extinct. Their fire has gone out of the universe. You, who carry a different flame, will be extinguished as well." Logan didn't bother with a retort. He just charged, his claws meeting her spinning crimson blade in a shower of sparks. She was fast, using the Force to augment her movements. But Logan's centuries of combat experience and unbreakable skeleton made him a relentless, unpredictable opponent. He took a glancing blow to the shoulder, the smell of burning flesh filling the air, but his healing factor sealed the wound almost instantly. He was a brawler against a dancer, and he was slowly, inexorably, wearing her down. While Logan occupied the Inquisitor, Scott and Kurt pressed on. Reaching the entrance to the Crystal City, the air hummed with power, and the psychic pressure intensified. Inside, the city was a labyrinth of shimmering corridors and vast, empty chambers. At its heart, they found her. Jean Grey floated in the center of a colossal atrium, suspended in a cocoon of swirling, fiery energy. Her hair was a living inferno, her eyes burned with white-hot power, and her face was a mask of anguish. The very air around her shimmered with heat haze, and chunks of crystal periodically tore themselves from the walls and floors to orbit her like a malevolent asteroid belt. "John!" Scott cried out, taking a step forward. Her head turned slowly. The voice that echoed in their minds was a chorus, layered with Jean's pain and the Phoenix's ancient, merciless will. "Scott, you shouldn't have come. I can't hold it back. It wants to burn everything. It's so hungry. We can help you, Jeannie. We can fix this." "There is no fixing this," the Phoenix Jean chorused. "There is only the fire. It showed me. This galaxy is sick. The dark side is a cancer. It wants me to be the cure." A wave of telekinetic force slammed into Scott, hurling him back against a crystal wall. He grunted in pain, his visor cracking. "Jean, please," Kurt pleaded, his tail lashing in fear. "Fight it. Remember who you are." "I remember." The voice was suddenly small, just Jean's. "I remember the mansion, the danger room, you. But the fire is so much louder." Her eyes blazed anew, the Phoenix reasserting control. "The cycle demands renewal. This galaxy will be cleansed." Outside, the battle reached its climax. The second sister, having disabled Boba Fett's ship and forced him to retreat, landed her shuttle near the Crystal City. She strode towards the entrance, her lightsaber igniting, intent on claiming the ultimate prize for her master. She never made it inside. A pillar of pure phoenix fire erupted from the apex of the Crystal City, piercing the void. It wasn't a weapon. It was a declaration. The second sister had a single moment to look up, her confidence turning to utter terror before the energy washed over her. There was no scream, no ash. She was simply unmade, erased from existence. The Vengeance-class frigate in orbit attempted to flee, but a tendril of the same cosmic fire lashed out, touching its hull. The massive warship vaporized in an instant, a brief, silent flower of light in the dark. Aboard the Lightbringer, everyone watched the displays in stunned, horrified silence. The sheer, absolute power on display was beyond comprehension. "Oh my God," Rogue whispered. Charles Xavier slumped in his chair, his face a portrait of defeat. "We're too late. The Phoenix is fully awake. It's not just Jean we have to save now. It's the entire galaxy from her." On the surface, Scott Summers picked himself up, staring at the being of incandescent power that had once been the woman he loved. The crack in his visor seemed to mirror the fracture in his heart. Logan arrived, bloodied but unbowed, the third sister's broken body left behind him. He took in the scene, the cosmic fire, the look on Scott's face. "What's the play, Psych?" he asked, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. Scott's jaw tightened. He adjusted his cracked visor, the leader reasserting himself over the heartbroken man. "We get the others. We get Charles. And we do what the X-Men have always done," he said, his voice flat and hard. "We save her from herself, no matter the cost." The Phoenix spread its wings of fire, and the dead world of Fedra burned with new, terrible life. The bridge of the Lightbringer was a tomb. The only sounds were the hum of life support and Vex's quiet, desperate swearing as he put as much distance as possible between them and the expanding corona of energy that had been the Fedra system. On the view screen, the light from the Phoenix's awakening was still visible, a malignant, fading star. Hank McCoy finally broke the silence, his voice hollow. "The energy readings are apocalyptic. They're orders of magnitude beyond anything in our databases, beyond a supernova. It's not just releasing energy, it's rewriting local physical laws." "She killed a Star Destroyer," Rogue said, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, like it was nothing, just poof. "She unmade an Inquisitor," Charles corrected softly, his face etched with a profound, weary grief. "She didn't just kill her. She erased her from the fabric of reality. The Phoenix Force does not destroy in the conventional sense. It consumes. It ends things on a conceptual level." The air shimmered with a double bamf as Kurt returned, Scott and Logan gripping his shoulders. They were covered in soot and minor burns, their faces grim. Scott's cracked visor seemed to symbolize their shattered mission. "Report," Charles said, though his telepathy had already gleaned the broad strokes. "It's not Jean," Scott stated, his voice stripped of all emotion. "Not anymore. It's the Phoenix, and it's wearing her like a suit. It talks through her, it feels her pain. But it's a cosmic predator. It thinks this galaxy is diseased, and that burning it to ash is a form of healing." Logan slammed a fist into the bulkhead, leaving a dent in the durasteel. "So, what's the plan?" "Chuck, we can't fight that. Nobody can." "We don't fight the Phoenix," Charles said, his voice gaining a sliver of its old authority. "We saved Joan. The woman is still in there, fighting a war for her own soul. Our task is to reach her, to tip the balance in her favor. And how in the 9 Corellian hells do we do that? Vex asked from the pilot's chair. You saw what it did. We can't get within a million clicks of her. We don't use ships. We don't use weapons. Charles looked at each of them in turn. We use our minds. A telepathic assault, not to attack, but to reinforce. We form a circuit, all of us. I will act as the conduit. We will pour every memory of love, of friendship, of home, into Jean's consciousness. We will remind the woman what she is fighting for. Hank adjusted his glasses, the scientist in him rising to the challenge. The psychic feedback could liquefy our brains, Charles. The Phoenix is a telepathic entity on a scale we can't comprehend. I am aware of the risk, but it is the only path that does not end with Jean's death or the galaxy's immolation. Charles's gaze was unwavering. This is what we are, a family, and we do not abandon our own. There were no dissenting voices. The choice was impossible, but it was the only one they had. While Hank and Vex worked to modify the ship's comms array to boost Charles's telepathic range, the others prepared in their own ways. Scott sat alone, polishing his visor, building a mental fortress of the memories he would offer. Their first date, a quiet afternoon by the lake at the mansion, the feel of her hand in his. Aurora meditated, gathering the calm certainty of the natural world she commanded, a counterpoint to the Phoenix's chaotic fire. Logan simply closed his eyes and remembered the countless small moments. Jean fixing his jacket, laughing at one of his crude jokes, the simple, steadfast goodness that had always been her core. Rogue approached Charles, her expression determined. Professor, when you do this, you'll be connected to all of us, right? Our minds wide open? Yes, child. Why? She began pulling off her long gloves. Then I'm going in with you. Not just my memories. I'm going to touch you, and I'm going to take a little piece of everyone. A little of Scott's love, a little of Logan's loyalty, a little of Storm's strength, a little of your hope. I'll hold it all, and when you find her, I'll give it to her. A direct infusion. Not a memory, a feeling. Charles stared at her, a flicker of awe in his eyes. Rogue, that is. Brilliant and incredibly dangerous. You could absorb too much, or the Phoenix could retaliate. I touched Vader and lived, she said with a grim smile. I can handle a little cosmic fire. It's for John. The plan was set. A desperate, insane gambit built on the one thing the Phoenix Force, for all its power, could never understand. The specific, messy, unconditional love of a found family. Aboard the Executor, the mood was one of cold fury. The loss of an Inquisitor and a Vengeance-class frigate was a significant blow. The hologram of Emperor Palpatine was a study in contained rage. The being you designated Jean Grey has demonstrated power beyond any previous estimation. Palpatine hissed. She is no longer a mere asset. She is an existential threat. The grand design cannot tolerate a variable of this magnitude. Darth Vader stood before the projection, his respirator cycling steadily. The other mutants are fleeing the system. They are insignificant. The Phoenix is the true threat. They are connected, the Emperor snapped. They go to ground now, but they will return to her, and when they do, they will be vulnerable. His eyes glowed with Sith lightning. The bounty has failed. The Inquisitors have failed. It is time for the Master to take the stage. You will go to Mustafar, Lord Vader. Prepare. When the time comes, you will lead the 501st Legion and my personal guard. We will not attempt to capture the Phoenix. We will annihilate it, and everything it holds dear. A cold certainty settled in Vader. This was a battle that could not be won with a lightsaber. It would require a deeper strategy, a more profound cruelty. He thought of the telepath, Charles Xavier, and his attachment to his students. He thought of the girl, Rogue, and the vulnerability she had exposed in him. The Sith understood power, but they also understood leverage. They believe their bond is their strength, Vader said, his mechanical voice low. We will make it their weakness. The Lightbringer emerged from hyperspace in a forgotten sector of the Outer Rim, a nebula of swirling dust and gas that would mask their energy signature. They had found their hiding place. Now came the hardest part, the wait. In the ship's common area, the 7 X-Men sat in a circle, hands linked. Rogue sat beside Charles, one bare hand resting gently on his arm. Her other hand was gloved, held tightly in Scott's. Remember, Charles said, his voice a calm center in the storm of their anxiety. Do not push, do not fight. Simply remember. Be a beacon for her. I will find the path. He closed his eyes. The others followed suit. Charles Xavier's consciousness expanded, shooting through the boosted comm array and out into the cosmic ether. He flew through a psychic landscape ravaged by fire, a mindscape of burning galaxies and screaming stars. The Phoenix was everywhere, a presence of infinite hunger and rage. But deep within the inferno, he found it, a single, trembling point of light. Jean's core self, barricaded behind memories of the X-Mansion, holding fast against the cosmic storm. Jean, he projected, pouring all his paternal love into the thought. We are here. The response was a wave of agony and relief. Charles, it's so strong. I can't hold on much longer. You don't have to hold it back alone. We are with you. We are always with you. He opened the circuit. Scott's love flowed through Charles, a river of unwavering devotion. Aurora's strength, as vast and enduring as the sky. Logan's fierce primal loyalty. Hank's boundless wonder and intellect. Kurt's faith and gentle heart. And Rogue. Rogue was the amplifier. She took the essence of each of them, the pure, unadulterated emotion, and focused it into a single, brilliant spear of light. It shot through the psychic plane, not as an attack, but as a lifeline. It pierced the Phoenix's fury and connected with Jean's flickering spirit. On the Lightbringer, tears streamed down Scott's face. Aurora trembled. Logan growled, his knuckles white. They were feeling it. The sheer, terrifying scope of Jean's struggle, the seductive, awful power of the Phoenix, and the desperate, beautiful strength of her love for them. For a timeless moment, the fire seemed to bank. The rage softened. In the heart of the nebula, light years away, Jean Grey, for the first time since her arrival, felt truly seen, truly loved, truly not alone. It was not a victory. The war for her soul was far from over. But it was a beachhead, a foothold. As the psychic link slowly dissolved, the X-Men slumped in their seats, drained but united. They had done it. They had reached her. Charles opened his eyes, exhaustion warring with triumph. She knows we're coming. She's waiting for us. The path was clear. They had reminded Jean of who she was. Now, they had to go and bring her home. The silence on the Lightbringer was heavy with the aftermath of their psychic ordeal. They had rested, eaten, and tended to their wounds. But the memory of touching Jean's tormented mind was a fresh brand on each of their souls. They had bought her a moment of clarity, but the clock was ticking. The Empire would not be idle. It was Hank who broke the contemplative quiet, his voice echoing from the ship's cramped engineering bay. Charles, you need to see this. I've been analyzing the residual energy signature from Fedra, cross-referencing it with our own displacement event. The team gathered around a flickering holoprojector. Hank's blue fingers flew across a keypad, pulling up complex astrometric charts and quantum field equations. The Phoenix Force isn't just a power within Gene, he explained, his tone that of a scientist uncovering a terrifying truth. It's a trans-dimensional constant. Its awakening didn't just create a localized energy surge. It acted as a catalyst, accelerating the very dimensional decay I warned you about. The hologram shifted to show a map of the galaxy, peppered with blinking red dots. These are nascent reality fractures, small, unstable pockets where the laws of physics are breaking down. And they're all centered on locations where we've used our powers extensively. A dot blinked over Corellia, another over Zygerria, a cluster around Dantooine. The largest, a pulsating crimson wound, marked the Fedra system. The Phoenix is the epicenter, Hank continued grimly. But we are the conduits. Our mutant energies, combined with the Phoenixes and the unique properties of this universe's force, are creating a feedback loop. We are, quite literally, tearing this galaxy apart at the seams. The weight of his words settled over them. This was no longer just about saving Jean or surviving the Empire. Their very presence was a cosmological threat. How long? Charles asked, his voice tight. Without intervention? Weeks, perhaps days before the fractures become self-sustaining and begin to merge? The resulting chain reaction would unmake local reality. So we have to go now, Scott said, his fists clenched. We get Gene and we get home. It's the only way to stop it. It's not that simple, Scott, Charles replied, his gaze distant. The act of confronting the Phoenix, of potentially triggering another massive release of its power, could be the very event that triggers the collapse. Then what's the play, Professor? Logan growled. We can't just sit here and let the universe fall apart. We don't, a new voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned. Vex stood there, a determined look on his green-skinned face. He tossed a data chip to Hank. While you were all having your group nap, I called in every favor I've got left in this rotten galaxy. That's the location. Sullust, abandoned geothermal tap station deep in the volcanic fissures. It's a fortress. The Empire doesn't know it exists, and the rebels forgot it. It's got massive power conduits, hardened against radiation and seismic activity. If you're going to try and pull your friend out of a cosmic fire, that's your best shot. It might even contain the blast if it goes wrong. Hope, fragile and desperate, flickered in the room. They had a target. A plan was cohering. We lure her there, Aurora said, her eyes alight with tactical clarity. We make it a place of significance. We make it feel like home. We use the fractures, Kurt added, his tail twitching with excitement. We do not fight the instability. We use it. We make a psychic road for her, a path made of our memories, leading to Sullust. Charles looked at his X-Men, a fierce pride swelling within him despite the terror of their situation. They were not just reacting, they were innovating. They were turning their greatest liability into their only strategy. Hank, can it be done? The beast was already scribbling equations on a data pad. Theoretically, if I can recalibrate the geothermal station's power regulators to emit a specific quantum frequency, and if Charles can imprint a resonant psychic signature upon it, we could create a temporary anchor point, a pocket of stabilized reality that would be incredibly appealing to a consciousness being torn apart by cosmic forces. It would be a lighthouse in the storm. Then that is our mission, Charles declared, We go to Sullust, we build our lighthouse, and we call Jean home. The volcanic world of Sullust was a hellscape of ash and fire. The Lightbringer descended through a perpetual pyroclastic haze, navigating by instrument alone until it slipped into a massive volcanic caldera, landing on a shielded platform outside the abandoned facility. The air stank of sulfur and ozone. They worked with a frantic, focused energy. Hank and Vex dove into the station's control systems, rerouting monstrous amounts of geothermal power. Scott and Logan, using his enhanced senses, secured the perimeter, setting up early warning sensors. Aurora took to the skies, not to command the weather, but to gently guide the choking ash clouds away from their position, her control a testament to her precision. At the center of the main chamber, beneath a vast dome that had once housed a planetary energy tap, Charles Xavier sat in his repulsor chair, surrounded by a web of cables and emitter nodes that Hank had rigged. Rogue stood by his side, her glove off. "It is time," Charles said. "The entire galaxy may be watching. The Empire will have felt our power usage. We will have one chance." He closed his eyes. The emitters around him hummed to life, glowing with a soft, golden light. Across the galaxy, the flickering reality fractures resonated in response, their chaotic energy subtly shifting, aligning. Charles's mind reached out, not to Jean this time, but to the psychic impression they had left, the lifeline of love and memory. He poured his own consciousness into the Sullust anchor, imprinting it with everything that defined the X-Men. The danger room, the Blackbird, the mansion's library, the smell of grass after rain, the sound of laughter in the cafeteria. He was building a memory made real, a pocket dimension of home. And the Empire came. Alarms shrieked. On the command console, a hologram displayed the sky above the caldera. It was filled with the dagger-shaped silhouettes of Imperial star destroyers. At their head was the Executor, Vader's flagship. They had been found. "They're not attacking," Scott reported, his voice crackling over the comm. "They're just surrounding us, forming a blockade." On the bridge of the Executor, Darth Vader observed the readings from the planet below. The energy signature was bizarre, unlike anything his sensors had ever recorded. It was not a weapon. It was a construct. "They are creating a sanctuary," he mused, understanding dawning. "They seek to tame the beast by offering it a cage of sentiment." His comlink chimed. It was the Emperor. "The creature approaches, Lord Vader. Sensors detect a hyperspace anomaly of incalculable energy on a direct course for Sullust. The Phoenix comes to their call." "They have gathered all their pieces on the board," Vader replied. "Now, we remove the king." He turned to a subordinate. "Ready my shuttle, and prepare the 501st. We descend to the surface. The Jedi, the mutants, have had their final reunion." Below, in the geothermal station, Charles's eyes snapped open, wide with alarm. "She's coming, and so is Vader. He's landing. He's bringing an army." Logan cracked his neck, his claws sliding out with a familiar snick. "Let him come." "No," Charles commanded, his voice brooking no argument. "Our mission is Jean. Nothing else matters. Scott, Aurora, Kurt, you are on interception. Delay Vader and his Legion. Do not let them reach this chamber. Hank, you and Rogue are with me. We must be ready for Jean." Scott nodded, the field commander taking over. "You heard the professor? We hold the line, no matter what." As the first Imperial shuttles began to pierce the ashy atmosphere, the X-Men moved to their positions. This was it, the final, desperate gamble. They had built their lighthouse. Now, they had to survive the storm long enough for their lost friend to find her way home. The sky over Sullust turned black with Imperial dropships. They fell like steel rain, disgorging lines of white-armored stormtroopers and the ominous, black-clad forms of the 501st Legion. The volcanic rock provided little cover, and the advancing wall of Imperial might was a terrifying spectacle of organized, implacable force. Scott Summers stood at the mouth of the main access tunnel, a lone figure against the tide. He took a breath, the familiar hum of power building behind his eyes. "Now," he said, and the world turned red. His optic blasts, unleashed at full, uncontrolled fury, were not precise beams, but a wide, scything wave of concussive force. It tore across the advancing line, not just knocking stormtroopers down, but vaporizing the very ground they stood on. Rock melted into glass. Entire squads were thrown back like toys. For a glorious, terrifying moment, Cyclops was a one-man artillery battery, holding back an army through sheer, destructive power. High above, Aurora Monroe rode the ash-choked winds, her form silhouetted against the glowing caldera rim. The Empire had come expecting to fight rebels. They were not prepared to fight a goddess. She raised her arms, and the planet itself answered. The volcanic vents surrounding the Imperial landing zone erupted not with lava, but with concentrated tornadoes of superheated ash and lightning. TIE fighters screamed down from the blockade, only to be swatted from the sky by fists of hurricane-force wind. She was a force of nature, and the Imperial war machine was just another landscape for her to reshape. From the shadows between rock formations, Kurt Wagner moved. Bamf. A thermal detonator thrown into a squad of troopers vanished an instant before it exploded, reappearing harmlessly high in the atmosphere. Bamf. A Legionnaire commander found his blaster missing from his hand, then felt a sharp strike to his helmet before his attacker vanished again. Kurt was a ghost, a phantom of sulfur and shadow, sowing chaos and confusion, making the Imperial advance a nightmare. But the heart of the Imperial assault was a singular, black-armored figure who strode through the chaos untouched. Blaster bolts deflected harmlessly from his raised hand. Storm's lightning forked away from him, earth-shattering as it was. He was a singularity of darkness, and he walked directly towards Scott Summers. Scott saw him coming and poured everything he had into one final, massive optic blast. The crimson energy, capable of punching through a mountain, slammed into Darth Vader. Vader stopped it. His lightsaber was a blur, but he didn't cut through the beam. He met it, holding the impossible energy at bay with his blade, his feet grinding backward through the rock from the sheer force. Sparks and energy cascaded around him, illuminating his mask in a hellish glow. With a guttural roar, Vader twisted his wrist, and Scott's own optic blast was deflected upward, carving a canyon into the caldera wall high above. Scott stared, exhausted, his power momentarily spent. He was defenseless. Vader closed the distance in 3 long strides, his lightsaber rising for the killing blow. A feral roar echoed through the tunnel. Logan launched himself from the darkness, tackling Vader at the waist and carrying them both out into the open. It was a brutal, close-quarters brawl. Logan's claws were a silver blur, seeking the gaps in Vader's armor, while the Dark Lord's lightsaber moved with lethal precision. Logan took a burning slash across his ribs, his healing factor screaming as it fought to close the wound. But he didn't retreat. He was a Wolverine, and he had latched onto his prey. "Go, Psych," he snarled, ducking under a decapitating swing. "Get to Jean. I've got this walking tin can." Scott didn't hesitate. He turned and ran back into the geothermal station. The door sealed behind him, Inside the central chamber, the air was vibrating. The emitter nodes glowed blindingly bright, and the very fabric of reality seemed to be thinning. Charles Xavier was pale, sweat pouring down his face, his knuckles white on the arms of his chair. "She's here," he gasped. The dome above them dissolved, not shattered, but simply ceased to be, revealing not Sullust's smoky sky, but a swirling vortex of cosmic fire. And at its center, descending slowly, was the Phoenix. It was both Jean and not Jean. Her form was wreathed in flames that burned without fuel, her eyes twin supernovas. The heat was not physical but psychic, a pressure that threatened to erase their very minds. "You called. I have come. The cycle must be completed." "Jean, no!" Scott screamed, skidding to a halt. "This isn't you. Look around you. This is home. We're your home." The Phoenix's gaze swept over them, ancient and pitiless. "This construct is a lie, a prison of sentiment. I am beyond such things." Rogue stepped forward, her hand outstretched toward Charles. "Professor, now!" Charles nodded, his telepathy slamming into Rogue's mind. She cried out as she absorbed it. Not just his power, but the concentrated essence of the psychic beacon he had built. The love, the memories, the very soul of the X-Men. She glowed with it, a soft, defiant gold against the Phoenix's raging crimson. "It ain't a prison, sugar," Rogue said, her voice strained but steady. She took a step toward the fiery entity. "It's a promise." She launched herself forward. The Phoenix raised a hand, intent on unmaking her as it had the second sister. But Rogue wasn't attacking. She was embracing. She wrapped her arms around the being of fire, and her bare skin made contact. The scream that tore through the chamber was not of pain, but of revelation. It was the voice of the Phoenix and the voice of Jean Grey, fused in a single, agonized cry. Rogue's mind was flooded with 1 billion years of cosmic fire, the endless cycle of death and rebirth. But she held on, and through her, Charles poured the lighthouse's signal directly into Jean's soul. Scott's love, Logan's loyalty, Aurora's strength, Hank's wonder, Kurt's faith, her own found family. The Phoenix faltered. The infinite fire met the finite, human, and utterly powerful love of 8 people who refused to let go. The cosmic entity, for all its power, had no defense against this. It could not comprehend it. "Yang." The voice was no longer a chorus, but a whisper. The flames began to recede, pulling inward. The vortex above collapsed. The incandescent form condensed, the fire cooling, solidifying, until Jean Grey stood before them, naked and trembling, her own green eyes wide with shock and recognition. She collapsed into Scott's arms. Outside, the battle ceased. The Stormtroopers, the 501st, they all stopped. The unnatural storms died down. The only sound was the grunt of effort and the clash of metal as Logan and Vader continued their duel. Vader, sensing the catastrophic shift in the Force, disengaged with a powerful shove of telekinetic energy that sent Logan flying. He stood, his lightsaber still lit, and stared at the sealed door to the chamber. He could feel it. The Phoenix was gone, subdued, tamed by something he could not fathom. He had lost. With a final, contemptuous glance at the recovering Logan, Darth Vader turned and strode back to his shuttle. The Imperial forces began a swift, organized retreat. The gamble had failed. The X-Men had won. Inside the chamber, Hank rushed to Rogue's side. The young mutant was unconscious, but breathing, a soft, golden light still fading from her skin. "She'll be all right," Hank confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. She did it. Charles Xavier let out a long, shuddering breath, the psychic emitters powering down around him. He looked at Scott holding Joan, at Aurora and Kurt helping a battered Logan inside, at Hank tending to Rogue. They were bruised, broken, and forever changed. But they were together. And Jean was home. The Lightbringer drifted in the silent space between stars, a lone vessel carrying the survivors of an impossible war. On the bridge, the mood was somber, a mixture of profound relief and deep exhaustion. Jean Grey, wrapped in a blanket and nestled between Scott and a worryingly attentive Logan, was quiet, her eyes holding the memory of cosmic fire and the warmth of a hard-won homecoming. Rogue slept in the med bay, Hank monitoring her vitals, the golden light of their shared experience having finally faded from her skin. The immediate threat was over. The Phoenix was quiescent, folded back into the depths of Jean's psyche, soothed by the anchor of her family's love. The Empire had retreated, its most feared enforcer bested not by a lightsaber, but by a bond he could neither break nor understand. The reality fractures across the galaxy had stabilized, the catalyst of the Phoenix's rage no longer fueling their growth. But they were still strangers in a strange land. Charles Xavier, looking out at the unfamiliar constellations, knew their journey was far from over. They had won a battle for a soul, but the war for their place in this galaxy remained. The Empire now knew their faces, their capabilities, and their profound weakness: each other. They could not hide forever. Yet, as he looked around at his X-Men, Scott's quiet determination, Aurora's regal strength, Logan's fierce loyalty, Hank's brilliant mind, Kurt's gentle faith, Rogue's courageous heart, and John's hard-won peace, he felt not fear, but a flicker of the old dream. A dream of coexistence, of a better tomorrow, that had somehow survived the journey across the universes. They were the X-Men, hunted, feared, and misunderstood, whether by sentinels on Earth or stormtroopers in a galaxy far, far away. But they were together, and in that, there was not just survival, but hope. A new kind of hope for a galaxy that desperately needed it. They had arrived as a disruption, an anomaly. Now, they had a choice: to find a way back to the world they knew, or to stand and fight for the one they had found. The path ahead was uncharted, fraught with danger and shadowed by Imperial star destroyers. But as the Lightbringer turned its nose toward the unknown, its crew knew one thing for certain. Whatever came next, they would face it as they always had, together.